and welcome back. In this BLACKEXCELLIST presentation, we will highlight Robert Smalls, the mastermind, businessman, and war hero.
Welcome to blackexcellist.com, the site where we share Black excellence, opulence, and affluence. Our mission is to inspire you as we enlighten you.
Robert Smalls proved himself to be a man of extraordinary character, from his daring escape from the Confederacy to his enlistment in the Union Army and Navy, which made him a hero to his later work in politics, fighting for the rights of African Americans. Smalls was not only admirable, but incredibly courageous, considering he acted under the very real threat of violence, but overcame all obstacles to deliver freedom to himself and his family. Smalls led a remarkable life that continues to be an inspiring example of courage, kindness, achievement, and service. In this original BLACKEXCELLIST video, we will be featuring the notorious Robert Smalls, businessman, war hero, and civil rights activist. So without further ado, let's get started. 1. Robert Smalls grew up in the fields of South Carolina. Robert Smalls was born in the small southern town of Beaufort, South Carolina, on April 5, 1839. His mother was Lydia Polite, who was enslaved by Henry McKee. Lydia Polite bore her son in a room behind the McKee's house. Robert Smalls was influenced by the low-country Gullah culture that he shared with his mother. Although his mother was a servant for the McKees, she grew up in the fields. While growing up, Robert Smalls was lucky enough to find favor above other slaves, most likely due to the slave master being his father. For the sake of learning hardship and understanding the pains of field slaves, his mother requested that he worked in the fields. However, the education she arranged for him in the fields was difficult for him to accept. The horrors he witnessed at the whipping post led Robert to become defiant and militant. He frequently found himself in the Beaufort jail, and his mother feared daily for her son's safety. At 12, at his mother's request, Robert was sent to work in Charleston as a laborer. He was paid $1 per week, with the rest being paid to his master. The youth first worked in a hotel, then became a lamplighter on Charleston streets. In his later teen years, his love of the sea led him to find work on Charleston's docks and wharves. He worked as a rigger, sailmaker, longshoresman, and wheelman. As a result of these various experiences, he became very knowledgeable about the Charleston harbor. 2. Smalls married Hannah Jones, and they were blessed with 3 children. Robert Smalls was 17 when he married his wife, Hannah Jones, on Christmas Eve of 1856. Smalls' wife, Hannah, was enslaved by the Kingsman family, but she worked as a maid at a Charleston hotel. With their owner's permission, the two moved into an apartment together, and they bore 3 children. Hannah actually had 2 daughters before she met and married Smalls. Their first daughter together, Elizabeth Lydia, was born 2 years after their marriage. In 1861, they had a son, Robert Jr., who unfortunately passed away at the age of 2. Their second daughter and third child was named Sarah Voorhees. Well aware that they would have no guarantee of a permanent union while being enslaved, Robert asked his wife's owner if he could purchase their family outright. Although Smalls planned on paying for their freedom via an outright purchase, he ultimately could not afford the steep sum of $800, but Robert had a backup plan. The Charleston harbor was occupied with Union ships during the Civil War, blocking supplies and military equipment from entering the port. For the enslaved like Robert, these ships signaled the tantalizing promise of freedom. While Smalls couldn't afford to buy his family on shore, he knew he could win their freedom by sea, so he told his wife to be ready for the opportunity whenever it would present itself. 3. Smalls was assigned to steer the CSS Planter at the start of the Civil War. In April 1861, the American Civil War started with the Battle of Fort Sumter in nearby Charleston Harbor. In the fall of 1861, Robert Smalls was assigned to steering duty aboard the CSS Planter. This was a lightly armed Confederate military transport under the command of District Commander Brigadier General Roswell S. Ripley. Planter's duties were to deliver dispatches and supplies, to survey waterways, and to lay mines for the Confederate Army. Robert Smalls piloted the Planter throughout Charleston Harbor, area rivers, as well as along the Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida coasts. Having won the confidence of the commander and crew of the Planter, he began to plot his escape in April 1862. 4. Smalls and 7 crewmen carried out his escape plan on May 12, 1862. The Planter moved through and beyond Charleston, picking up large guns, ammunition, and firewood. On the evening of May 12, 1862, as the Planter docked near General Ripley's headquarters, its 3 white officers disembarked to spend the night ashore, as they often did. At 3 a.m. the next day, Smalls and 7 crewmen carried out his planned escape to the Union blockade ships. Smalls wore the captain's uniform and a similar straw hat to the captain's. With his disguise in place, he transported the Planter past the southern wharf and picked up his wife and children and the families of other crewmen. He guided the Planter past 5 Confederate harbor forts without incident as he gave the correct signals at checkpoints. Smalls was very meticulous in imitating Captain Rayleigh's mannerisms and straw hat to fool Confederate onlookers from shore and the forts. The Planter sailed past Fort Sumter at around 4:30 a.m. The alarm was only raised after the ship was beyond gun range. Smalls headed straight for the Union Navy fleet, replacing the rebel flags with a white bed sheet, which was brought by his wife. The Planter had been seen by the USS Onward, a Union ship, which was about to fire until a crewman spotted the white flag. The Onward's captain, John Frederick Nichols, boarded the Planter, and Smalls asked for a United States flag to display. Smalls surrendered the Planter and its cargo to the United States Navy. Smalls' extremely risky and intricate escape plan had succeeded. He and his family were now free. 5. Smalls would prove to be a very valuable resource for the Union. Captain Nichols communicated Smalls' ingenious escape to his commander, Captain E.G. Parrott. Not only had Smalls delivered to the Union an entire Confederate ship, but also a cache of light guns, 4 loose artillery pieces, and 200 pounds of ammunition. However, even more valuable were the Confederate captain's code book containing the Confederate signals and a map of the mines and torpedoes that had been laid in Charleston's harbor. Smalls' own extensive knowledge of the Charleston region's waterways and military configurations proved highly valuable. Smalls gave detailed information about Charleston's defenses to DuPont, commander of the blockading fleet. Federal officers were surprised to learn from Smalls that, contrary to their calculations, only a few thousand troops remained to protect the area, the rest having been sent to Tennessee and Virginia. They also learned that the Coles Island fortifications on Charleston's southern flank were being abandoned and were without protection. This intelligence allowed Union forces to capture Coles Island and its string of batteries without a fight just a week after Smalls' escape. The Union would hold the Stono Inlet as a base for the remaining 3 years of the war. DuPont was impressed and wrote the following to the Navy Secretary in Washington. Robert, the intelligent slave and pilot of the boat, who performed this bold feat so skillfully, informed me of the capture of the Sumter, presuming it would be a matter of interest. He is superior to any who have come into our lines, intelligent as many of them have been. 6. Smalls was a major general in the Civil War who battled in 17 major engagements. Having just turned only 23, Smalls quickly became known in the North as a hero for his daring exploit. Newspapers and magazines reported his ingenious escape, and the U.S. Congress even passed a bill awarding Smalls and his crewmen the prize money from the Planter. Smalls began to serve the Union Navy, especially with his detailed knowledge of mines laid near Charleston. Shortly thereafter, Smalls made a trip to Washington, D.C. to persuade Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton to permit black men to fight for the Union. Stanton soon signed an order permitting up to 5,000 African Americans to enlist in the Union forces at Port Royal. Robert Smalls worked as a civilian with the Union Navy until March 1863, when he was transferred to the Army. He was present at 17 major engagements and battles in the Civil War. Smalls piloted the Crusader and the Planter. He was also made pilot of the ironclad USS Keokuk and participated in the attack on Fort Sumter on April 7, 1863. When the Planter was under fire in December 1863, Robert Smalls refused to surrender, fearing that his black crewmen would not be treated appropriately as prisoners of war and might be summarily killed. Smalls entered the pilot house and took command of the ship, which he successfully piloted to safety. For this, he was promoted to the rank of captain and made acting captain of the Planter. Robert Smalls was discharged from the Army on June 11, 1865. 7. After the Civil War, Smalls returned to his native town and started a business. At the outset of the Civil War, Smalls could not read or write, but he achieved literacy in Philadelphia. In 1864, Smalls was in a streetcar in Philadelphia and was ordered to give his seat to a white passenger. Rather than ride on the open overflow platform, Smalls left the car. This incident of humiliating a heroic veteran was cited in the debate that resulted in the legislators passing a bill to integrate public transportation in Pennsylvania in 1867. After his exploits in the war, Smalls returned to his native Beaufort, where he purchased his former master's house that was offered up for sale because the Union tax authorities had seized it in 1863 for the owner's refusal to pay taxes. Later, the former owner sued to regain the property, but Smalls won the case and retained the ownership in the court case. The case became an important precedent in other similar cases. In 1866, Robert Smalls went into business in Beaufort with Richard Howell Gleaves, a Philadelphia businessman. Both men established a store for freedom in Beaufort. Robert also paid for the services of a teacher to help him study business and finance. Smalls invested significantly in the economic development of Charleston-Beaufort region. Smalls was also known for his contributions toward the economic development and growth of Beaufort and Charleston. Following the prosperity from the Reconstruction policy, Robert Smalls and other representatives, including Alonzo Rancier and Joseph Rainey, established the Enterprise Railroad. This was an 18-mile, horse-drawn railway line that moved passengers and cargo between the Charleston wharves and inland depots. Except for one white director, the railroad's board of directors was entirely African American. Author Bernard E. Powers describes it as the most impressive commercial venture by members of Charleston's black elites. Additionally, Smalls owned and helped publish a black-owned newspaper, the Beaufort Southern Standard, starting in 1872. Lastly, Smalls purchased a 2-story Beaumont building and donated its use as a school for African American children. 8. Smalls became a politician who served 5 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. Due to his wartime fame and his ability to speak the Gola dialect, Robert Smalls had the avenue to advance his political career. Smalls was a loyal Republican, which at the time dominated the northern states and passed laws that granted protections for African Americans. Robert Smalls' return to Southern politics began when he was elected a delegate at the 1868 South Carolina Constitutional Convention, where he was involved in efforts to make compulsory and free schooling available to every South Carolina child. He also served as a delegate at several Republican national conventions. In the same year, he was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives. He was very effective and introduced the Homestead Act and worked to pass a civil rights bill. In 1870, Smalls was elected to the Senate to fill an unexpired seat, and in 1872, he won re-election. In the Senate, he was considered a very good speaker and debater. Robert Smalls was appointed Lieutenant Colonel of the 3rd Regiment, South Carolina State Militia in 1873. He was promoted to Brigadier General of the 2nd Brigade and the Major General of the 2nd Division, South Carolina State Militia. In 1874, Robert Smalls was elected to the United States House of Representatives, where he served 2 terms, from 1875 to 1879. Smalls also represented South Carolina's 5th Congressional District in the House from 1882 to 1883. He was also elected from the 7th District, where he served from 1884 to 1887. In summary, Robert Smalls was a member of the 44th, 45th, 47th, 48th, 49th U.S. Congresses. 9. Smalls would remarry and would have 1 child with his second wife. Smalls' first wife, Hannah, departed this earth on July 28, 1883. 7 years after her death, Robert Smalls married Annie Wigg, a Charleston schoolteacher, who bore 1 son named William Robert. Annie later passed away in 1895. On February 23, 1915, at the age of 75, Robert Smalls passed away of diabetes and malaria. He was buried on his father's property in the churchyard of the Tabernacle Baptist Church, located in downtown Beaufort. Robert Smalls' monument in this churchyard has a statement he made to the South Carolina legislature in 1895. "My race needs no special defense, for the past history of them in this country proves them to be the equal of any people anywhere. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life." 10. Smalls has received several posthumous awards and accolades. We salute the notorious Robert Smalls. His story is one that legends are made of. He was an enslaved African American who escaped to freedom in a Confederate supply ship and eventually became a sea captain for the Union Navy. After the war, he became a successful businessman and politician, serving in both houses of the South Carolina legislature. Truly fascinating. Among his several honors and lasting legacies, Robert Smalls' home in Beaufort, South Carolina, has been made a National Historic Landmark. At the church of his interment, a statue and a monument are dedicated to keep his memory. In Cheraw, South Carolina, a school is named after Robert Smalls. The Robert Smalls Middle School in Beaufort County, South Carolina, is named after him as well. A statue of Robert Smalls is in the U.S. National Museum for African American History and Culture. Moreover, in 2004, the U.S. named a logistics support vessel operated by its Army after Robert Smalls. It's called the USAV Major General Robert Smalls.
We appreciate the fact that you stayed with us until the end. Thank you for spending time with us, and don't forget to like this video. Also, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a video. Bye for now. We will see you tomorrow.